Arc Raiders Riven Tides update added a handful of things and changed others. One thing that was interesting though about said changes is that some of them left the door open for the future, hinting at changes beyond. Today I want to run down a few things that are noted to be coming as changes, as well as discuss the future of a system we've engaged with since launch. So drop your thoughts down below, drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe to stay up there with all things Arc Raiders, as we still have quite a bit to discuss with Riven Tides and of course beyond, now gearing up for the relatively unknown future, with perhaps a new roadmap dropping soon to provide more insight, but either way, I'd love to have you in the community. Finally, today's video is brought to you in part by the Division Resurgence, but more on that in a little bit. For now, let's get into it. So first thing, let's talk about something that's been explicitly mentioned by the team at Embark and the future of Arc Raiders. With the Riven Tides update, we are introduced to a new augment, the Tactical Mark III Smoke Augment. This being an upgrade to the Mark II with simply more carry capacity, a few more inventory slots, another augmented slot, and another safe pocket, but still relatively doing the same thing and relatively weaker by comparison to other Mark III augments out there, right? Well, even Embark has acknowledged this. In the patch notes, they said explicitly, with the addition of another tactical augment in this patch, it's worth stating that we are aware of some augments, particularly the combat augments, are not performing as well in their roles as we'd like. We are working on a general balancing pass for augments to buff some of those that are underperforming, most especially the combat Mark III flanking augment, which has yet to find its place to shine. It is also a goal to develop the full roster of augments to ensure that all categories are well represented. Now, what this means is augments are going to see some sort of adjustment. Now, to what extent and what that entails, we still don't know just yet, but it's nice to hear that we will see a sort of overhaul to this and a sort of balancing pass to all of these and the augment offering. The early assessment here of this though, I 100% agree and understand with these intentions. I've said it a bit in recent discussions that even though we have now, 9 Mark III augments, I feel like I truly ever only need to use one, my Survivor augment. The combat ones in particular, as they stated, well, I certainly think they're at a disadvantage, or at least have yet to really find their footing. If you're a combative player, PvP may be your main thing, whatever, well, I think the aggressive has some elements that are worthwhile, probably still not your #1 choice, but with a heavy shield compatibility, if you choose to run that, while also restoring 2 health every 5 seconds that allows you to passively heal, which is beneficial along those lines, plus 2 dedicated grenade slots that can really allow you to maximize your quick use options, saving some of those maybe utility spots for healing or a defib or something like that, since you have those 2 grenade spots already tackled. But the flanking one in particular is kind of the opposite, where to me it is almost entirely useless, in most cases at least, because you only have the availability of a light shield compatibility, not even a medium, which is like the sweet spot I would say for most players, and then a faster swap speed for pistols and hand cannons is, I mean, that's not something that many people are using. Again, if you are in a combative state here, there's a good chance you're going to be running something other than like a Berletta, or while yeah, maybe an Anvil still can be attributed to that, it might not be your first choice here at this. So it's entirely understood when you consider these things that they'd want to be looking further into that balancing and how you make it so much so not a one-tiered system where you have 9 options, but you only choose 1, 2, maybe 3 of those in your regular rotation. Having all of these options, of course, is nice to accommodate every single type of playstyle perhaps that they're trying to build out, but at the same time, it also is something that you have to make sure every single one of these has some sort of thing worth using. And for right now, a lot of those don't really have that. So there's definitely going to be some work here that has to be done. How they change this, your guess is as good as mine, but it's nice to see that the issues have been acknowledged, where it is something that we now have a confirmation that these types of changes will be made, that a balancing pass to something that has been a talked about thing of we should probably fix this for a while is actually going to happen. Now, another thing that was mentioned as of lately, not explicitly in these patch notes, was that of skills and how they'll be working in the future. Of course, with the expedition going on right now, we have the idea of we're going for these 5 skill points, right? Like on the other side of this expedition, this other side of the reset, you're going to have anywhere from 5 to 15 extra skill points right up front to use. That's always great, but the current sort of tree and set of skills we have may not necessarily be what we have for too long. Some of these may be getting adjusted because, as I'm sure you've probably come into contact with, there's quite a few of these that are not necessarily serving a great purpose aren't working at all, or could be rebalanced in some capacity. Before we get to that though, a quick message from today's sponsor, The Division Resurgence. Launched earlier this month, The Division Resurgence lets you take the full experience of The Division on the go. Portable, immersive, and built for a satisfying mobile gameplay experience. Following the world of The Division, Resurgence follows a new wave of agents operating in the vast world of New York City during the chaos, bringing you Division-style missions focused on reclaiming districts, responding to threats, and fighting back against an unstable city and its factions. Whether progressing main story missions, exploring and looting the world, or taking on the Dark Zone, it's all there. The Division Resurgence leans into that co-op experience where you can either play with friends to take down tougher encounters, but you're also more than welcome to play solo and progress however quickly you'd like to, where you can earn new gear, upgrade your loadouts, and progress and customize your agent in meaningful ways to expand your gameplay experience, all designed with AAA in mind while on the go. The Division Resurgence is free to play and available now for you to check out and jump into on your platform of choice, so if interested, make sure to check out the link in the description below for where you can go to download. And thanks again to the Division Resurgence for sponsoring this video. So coming back to it, the topic of skill points. This is something that has been mentioned in recent interviews as coming soon. A little while back, Virgil Watkins, design director at Embark, sat down with Games Radar to talk about the game up until that point, learning points and things to expect long term. One of those things was skills. It was asked, a big draw of the expedition is the skill points and how they compound over time, but some players testing have found that several skills are kind of underwhelming. Are you looking to buff weaker skills? With a reply then from Watkins saying, it's 100% on our radar. I think that even internally we know there's certain skills I don't choose, so yeah, 100%. I'm not going to pretend like there are going to be some skills on there that need some work. That'll be something that changes again. I won't say when or in what nature, but we're not deaf to the state of it. There was also then a follow-up question to press a little further, in which it was asked, is there a danger of making skills too good, assuming some players might say have 20 extra skill points from expeditions? To which Watkins mentioned, precisely, this is the danger there, and that's why skill points come right up to the line of, do I have a clear advantage over another player? So we'd have to be quite deliberate. The current intent is skill points will not be the reward forever with expeditions. It will cap out at some point to whatever kind of makes sense. The intent is if you've done enough expeditions to have, say, the full amount of extra skill points available to you, you've got maybe a couple of slight quality of life changes, like I can have a little extra stamina and still do security breach and maybe move quieter, or whatever the constellation of those points you've allocated is. So first point on the board here when it comes to foundational changes to skill points is that these skill points for expeditions are not going to be the reward forever. Of course, now this brings into question a million different things that we could think of as substitute rewards for that either season-long goal or the expedition window goal like we're seeing now with the damage challenge coming up. Does that include blueprints carrying over? Does that include cosmetics that may be exclusive beyond what we see so far? But we don't know exactly what these plans upcoming will be. But it seems like, at least for the last couple of months now, it has been the target that it will be changing in the near future. As to when, we'll touch on that in just a second. But our newest discussion mention here of this whole sort of situation comes from an interview with the Game Maker's Notebook. Virgil Watkins once again did a bit of a press tour and talked a bit about things in the game and learnings we've seen to date on such things like skills and their future. Now, he was asked to touch on that a little bit. It was said, talk a little bit about what went into the skill tree, because maybe I'm just the person who's super into the game and it feels actually really meaningful to me, or maybe I'm not. But it feels like the amount of thinking about what those things do exactly maybe went above and beyond some other games I've played recently. To which Watkins replied, it was a tough problem space for us, and I don't think that we by any means nailed it. Definitely, there's some skills on there that, as we've seen how players actually play the game, and also some of the choices we've made since then about how certain systems have changed or certain progression loops have changed, there are definitely skills that are underserving their purpose. A lot of thought went into, whenever possible, I don't love things that are just small statistical changes, but that they do serve a purpose as opposed to like, I have an entire new ability now, or I can do this thing now that I couldn't do before. And that then becomes a really tricky situation for us. This breaks down a little further into the whole PvP versus PvE gameplay loops, where Watkins explained, do we really want someone who invests in this wing of the skill tree to be obviously more capable? Like, because they chose those, they're going to win over someone who, like, invested in the red tree instead. It's a tricky problem space, and we're evaluating some pretty significant changes to it to better serve the game that exists today and the game that will exist in the future. It comes back to can the skill tree with its composition paired with things like augments and your preference of weapons and gadgets you choose, can that help you all form a playstyle for you. So the key things to pick out, of course, the prior knowledge that we have that this wasn't going to be something we get more of in terms of skill points for every expedition, that they also were looking to change some of these for a little while, but also the mention here explicitly of we're evaluating some pretty significant changes to it to better serve the game that exists today and the game that will exist in the future. That's a very key distinction here because it has been noted for quite some time that Arc Raiders kind of took off in a way that Embark didn't really expect it to. I think a partial irony of this game was that from the development, if you look at the multi-year progression of how things worked, the earliest iterations of this game, they couldn't find internally a way to make PvE work. So they transitioned then to a PvPvE game that became the extraction shooter and that genre that we see so much of today. But whenever the game launched, the social elements of it took over, and we've seen a ton of players embracing the PvE side of Arc Raiders, with it even being reported from Embark themselves that 30% of players play PvE exclusively, 30% play PvP exclusively, and the other 40% being that middle ground that again is kind of in the fluctuation point where you're maybe going to be on edge a bit more, but you can still find that friendly raider that will be willing to help you out. So because this game took off in ways that they didn't necessarily anticipate whenever they were making it, some of these skills weren't exactly made to the degree that they maybe could have been, or for situations that we see players in currently at all. Watkins in a previous interview was asked what kind of skills he would personally change, where he said, speaking for myself, maybe someone out there will disagree, but the ones that are centered around melee hits on certain things, like taking arc out in one shot and stuff like that. If I recall, back when we were starting to build a skill tree, the way the melee system was then and the way that certain things would play out, that was a little more practical. But then, once you see how people are actually engaging with the game and the distance at which they prefer to take stuff on, those kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. There's other skills, of course, that we can look at adjusting, like some of the ones that, even if you invest the full 5 skill points in them, still don't have a very clear impact on how you actually play moment to moment. We can see about what we can do with those. So I think that mention is a great sort of encapsulation of just some of the base divide in terms of what was planned versus how the game actually played. Melee stuff, I've never once thought about investing into the melee to take out Arc because, again, I'm not that close to them usually. And I'll usually have a weapon like an anvil or something that I can just one-shot something anytime it gets close, like a pop or a fireball or something like that. Additionally, his mention explicitly of the things that they don't have very clear impact on the skills, that's probably something that a lot of people would end up saying is one of the biggest problems with the skill tree that we see today. Reddit user Grim Dallows actually ended up doing a great rundown of some of these here that we see in the skill tree that talk about these types of things, where the reduced deafness from explosions, the dealing more damage to drones, revitalizing squats, suffer in silence, things like that that just don't explain how these actually work. One in particular that actually stands out to me a lot is calming stroll. That's one that I've written off for months because you have to use an entirely different key. You're not using a W key if you're on mouse and keys. You have to use V for your walk key. But if you actually end up having that maxed out, you can end up getting the same effect as if you were aiming down sight and walking. That's the same effect here, but you don't ever think about it because it's not mentioned like that. But in a situation where you're aiming down sight in a gunfight, getting that stamina back at a quicker pace is something that honestly makes a huge difference, but you wouldn't know that that's a thing. So there are a lot of things that ultimately we could see those changes to more skills in relation to just how they're acknowledged and pass along that accurate information of what they do, but ultimately we could end up seeing actual changes to these skills as well. Now, both of these things sound pretty nice. When can we end up seeing this though? Because I mean, all of it right now is just talk. When can these changes perhaps be enacted? Well, as for the sort of augment changes, this is something that was more explicitly mentioned as coming soon. So when you lay something out like that in the patch notes, it's probably going to be happening within the next couple of weeks. They put that on the radar publicly versus the skills. They end up talking about that in a sort of just discussion based around the general sort of design philosophy of the game and where they want to take that in the future. So if we're sort of taking our darts and throwing them at the dartboard, I'm thinking that the sort of augment changes will see a balancing pass within the next couple of weeks leading up to whenever the May content update will be, maybe as a backstop there, that maybe we see these coming in the next couple of weeks with these smaller updates, maybe also accompanying some of the changes made to what we see with the degradation and the decay of weapons on the per shot basis, because of course, we have mentioned that those uncommon, common, and rare weapon types, they kind of got hit pretty hard with this Riven Tides update and how they redid the decay decay on each of those weapons, that with all the public opposition, it's very possible we could see some of that reverted. I personally don't agree with those changes. I'm on the side of so many other people that I think those are overkill. I think you just had to decrease the amount of decay on those rarer items and you'd be totally fine. But maybe we see some of those changes coming in the more minor updates in the weeks to follow, while also maybe accompanying some of these adjustments to the augments overall. And then the skills in particular, that's one of those things that is kind of interesting because that can almost be attributed perhaps to the expedition and the way they're trying to take that overall. I've said that this expedition kind of feels like a transitional state where, one, I definitely think they should have communicated this kind of stuff earlier. I still will stand firm on the fact that I really want to end up seeing requirements for expeditions being communicated earlier in the season, if not right at the beginning, so that players have that full 2 months to end up knowing explicitly what they need to do and going for, rather than perhaps grinding out 3 million in coins for it to not really matter at the end of it. But with the first step in changing the expeditions overall to a challenge-based thing rather than just simply gathering resources and coins, this was the first step in that. But with the mention in past interviews that they want to eventually get off of skill points as the rewards, that's something that is another step that we're still waiting on. And then the changes to the skills themselves, well, these seem like bigger top level things rather than just balancing. So my guess is that we will not see that kind of stuff until at least at the earliest the May content update a month from now, perhaps even further on beyond that, because those are foundational things that take a bit more time to end up making sure you have right, because game dev's a house of cards. You mess one thing up, it could topple the whole system. So like maybe that comes in May, June, maybe July, but that's still a little further off. But we at least do know that these two areas are major targets for the Embark team working on Arc Raiders here. So that said, that's where we're going to wrap it up. I wanted to fill you guys in on a few things that I think are definitely worth noting here in regards to upcoming changes. As for when, as for what exactly will be changed, those are still question marks, but will be revealed in time. For now, though, that's where we're going to wrap it up. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a favor and drop a like on it. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Arc Raiders and even more FPS content I'd love to have in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Modest Man Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.